It looks like there's still no attendees, so we're good for now. Okay, Kyle's one of the panelists. He's in the attendee. And so is Kadijat Richmond, both of them. There we go.
Hello.
Joys the technology.
Wonderful.
Right, and I don't see any attendees logged in yet, so.
Hey, Jacqui, I'm gonna send you one slight improvement.
I'm gonna stop sharing them. I'm pulling up my Outlook so I can download it when you email it.
Okay. I just added another graphic for Kyle. Hi, Abigail. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. I did send a question because I didn't build this, so I don't know what the registration was like to see if I could get an update on who we might be expecting. But regardless, I'm very happy to host you with this presentation because we are recording them so that we can share them with people to watch on their own time.
Have you sent it the new PowerPoint? Or do you just want to share your screen and you pull it up?
Okay, but I sent it in the same email. Oh, I can share. Okay.
Also, I start on the Maryland First statewide virtual transfer fair slide, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna say okay. Sure. And Jacqui, you're doing 3-minute activity, right?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you still didn't get it, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I just refreshed my email. So like I said, if you want to share your screen, you can go ahead and do that. Have you heard anything about the number of people we should expect? Because I don't see anyone yet.
I did not get a response yet.
Kyle, this is the only thing I just added. We had the resources for the transfer coordinator and contacting your ADA office.
You guys can definitely chime in. I only had like a few words about that slide. I mean, but it wasn't too much we needed to say, just more so about the resources being at their fingertips. So.
Oh, I just got your PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
I had one more person I asked, so I hopefully will get a response. And then regardless about if we do have people live here, I would like to start at some point in the next couple of minutes, and I can do just a little bit of this introduction that I have. Read your description, and then I'll hand it over to you if that's all right.
That works.
Okay, perfect. This is always the part that always makes me anxious because I'm like, I didn't build it, so I can't see. I wish I had the answers for you right now.
All good. So we'll wait. Are you talking to us? Because you're muted.
It always helps to be unmuted. Sorry.
I saw you move your hands. I was like, I think she's talking.
I was asking if the question and answer period would be facilitated by Abigail at the end of the PowerPoint, or if we should have the chat and Q&A open.
What I told her, we were going to save questions for the end, and she said to promote using the Q&A feature because that's saved, so they can collect the questions after.
Okay. Together as a group of us, I know that in other like webinars I've been in, when people will answer some people will answer Q&A during the presentation, and you can see what's answered and what's dismissed. Should we just save everything to the end? Okay.
Yeah, I think that'll just be easier.
Agreed.
Well, I haven't gotten any responses back yet. How do you guys feel about getting started?
Connectivity piece.
That's fine.
That's okay.
Yes.
For summer school. Or
Well,
just...
I'm very pleased to welcome you to ASU's National Transfer Week, and we're happy to host a session on Maryland's Community College Transfer and Articulation Group. We have a short description saying that during the COVID-19 pandemic, the transfer coordinators from your institution came together to collaborate and support each other through challenging times, leading the first statewide virtual transfer fair, and to build connections between the Maryland community colleges, collaborating and developing your network. And in this session, you're going to provide information about how the Transfer Articulation Affinity group was developed and how the transfer coordinators continue to use this as an opportunity to support the community colleges through this statewide collaboration. So I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away. Thanks for being here.
Right. So thank you for joining today's session. First, we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll jump in and get started. So my name's Jacqui Rogers-Frere, and I am the interim assistant registrar at the College of Southern Maryland, and I serve as our communications specialist for this organization. And I'll turn it over to my co-host to introduce themselves.
Good day, everyone. Dr. Kadijat Richmond. I serve as the Director of Transfer Advising at Arundel Community College, located in Arnold, Maryland. Previous Vice President of Transfer of the Affinity Group, which we'll get into in a bit.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kyle Turman. I am representing Prince George's Community College here in Maryland. I also serve on the Affinity Group as the president.
Right. So here we're going to talk to you today about our organization, how we got started, how we've developed, and where we are today. So it's all about collaboration and communication across the community colleges in our state. For those of you who don't know, the Maryland Community Colleges, we are not in a system. We each operate independent of each other. So that's why this has become really important. Next slide. So originally, back in the day, we had this group. They called themselves the Transfer Affinity Group, and it was a subgroup of the Academic Advising Affinity Group in our state. The Academic Advising Affinity Group was all the community college's academic advising staff, and then underneath that, those who dealt more with transfer kind of would get together. They would gather over lunch and just talk about specific issues regarding transfer and share some resources. And really, when this group got together, the focus was more on transfer advising. So not as much all the other pieces that we have since developed. Next slide. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw this as an opportunity for us to come together more and support each other and look at the opportunities. Here in the state of Maryland, especially the last couple of years, like a lot of places, transfers become a big focus. And we knew we couldn't do all this on our own, so we needed to work together. At that point, we gathered together and created an actual leadership team for this group. Originally, back when we were gathering for lunches, it was really one person just doing it all. And we realized that one person could not manage all this. And this was also a good opportunity for us to network and get to know each other more. So with this, we created a leadership group that consisted of a president who led the organization. The past president role is a special role where it's the previous president who kind of just stays on to help with the transition and provide some historical knowledge. So they're more of the historian type role for this group. We also have a vice president of transfer and a vice president of articulation. We realized as we started getting together that even though this group originally was created as a subgroup of advising, not all of us transfer professionals were in advising. All of us were in different areas on our campuses. So we felt by dividing into transfer and dividing into articulation, it helped encompass that group. We also have a communications manager. That's the role I currently serve in. So this person manages our Gmail account, handles scheduling our meetings, sending out reminders, emails, things like that. And then our executive secretary is responsible for taking notes and minutes during our meetings. So once this leadership team got together, we created a mission and objectives. What is the purpose of this group? We also outlined duties for each person. So that way it wasn't kind of just one person doing it all like it used to be. We had an idea of when you took on this volunteering role, what were you supposed to do? We also made sure we had organized meetings. Instead of gathering over lunch, that wasn't as much of a possibility during COVID. So we moved to a Zoom platform, and our goal was to, as a whole affinity group, to meet at least twice a semester. Sometimes we would meet more depending on what was happening in the state. Any pieces I'm missing? All right. So with that, we became the Transfer and Articulation Affinity Group. With this, we see representation from throughout the community college. We see faculty who are involved because sometimes, depending on the institution, the faculty are the ones directly dealing with articulations, things like that. We still had representation from advising because the transfer advising a piece, just like it talks about in research and literature, is so important to transfer success. We also made sure we specifically had articulation professionals from each group. With recent legislative changes, there's a renewed focus on making sure we're doing articulation agreements and doing them a certain way. So this has become an opportunity for all the articulation professionals from each community college to kind of collaborate, bounce ideas off each other, things like that. Also, sometimes there would be representation from records office or the registrar's office, because sometimes issues we saw in outgoing transfer also impacted incoming transfer to our community colleges. So keeping that in mind. As we started to gather, we started taking on a few new initiatives. One is specifically event planning. We started putting on certain events together, both professional development wise and student event wise, to help provide resources for across the state. We also started developing professional development opportunities, either people from our organization, or sometimes we would have guest speakers from across the state who would come and speak to us about how to do transfer and things like that. And so once we started meeting about twice a semester, this is usually the different topics we had. Like I talked about, we had guest speakers. We previously had leadership from the Maryland Higher Education Commission, the leadership from the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. We've also had guest speakers from such as published authors and things like that come and speak to us. We also have used this as a resource for advocacy. There are times when one of us community colleges are dealing with an issue, chances are we're not alone. So we use this as an opportunity to kind of come together in unified voice when there's been an issue to advocate and support our students. This has also become a group that really has had to become aware of legislation and policy. Over the past 2 years in the state of Maryland, there has been some significant bills passed and signed into law involving transfer. And sometimes we're literally have been finding out from each other in this group. So we've used this as an opportunity to study the legislation and figure out how do we implement this in our institutions and how do we do this to ensure our students' best interests are still at heart. We also use this to discuss best practices and trainings and informationals. So like I talked about, for a lot of us, this is an opportunity for us to bounce ideas off each other, see, if you're having this issue, how you handled it at your institution and things like that.
And just want to piggyback off of one of the things Jacqui said, when we talk about advocacy and legislation and policy, as many of you will know, it can be really hard to move the needle when it's just you from your small little desk trying to speak upwards. When there are many of you from your small desk speaking upwards across the state, you're much more likely to be heard. And so we really used this affinity group as an avenue to have our voices heard. And in doing that, we're really having our students' voices heard. And what are the issues that are plaguing them when they try to transfer? What are the certain colleges that are not taking certain courses that we're all experiencing? And how do we get someone to listen to us?
And I'll just add one little tad bit to that. This also shows professionals that no matter where you sit, you can have a voice. And because we have all been working together, we are constantly given a seat at the table, which is vital to our success and how we've been moving and operating.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to what I will call transfer student engagement event planning, which was one of the things we touched on earlier. Transfer fairs are extremely beneficial for community college students as they allow the students the opportunity to connect with various four-year colleges and universities in hopes of ensuring their success and transfer completion of their associate's degree. Last year, we recognized, based on the fiscal year, that more than 11,000 Maryland Community College students transferred to the University of Maryland system institutions. USM are the uh, state institutions in Maryland, just for clarity on what that is. Our goal as community colleges are to offer Maryland students the opportunity to connect with and learn from our four-year colleges and university partners. The partnering of all the community colleges has allowed us to establish transfer virtual fair, which has aided in our community college students in providing equal, meaning the same access, which is pertinent to their transfer information, which assists them in a seamless transfer process. And next, we're going to do a 3-minute activity led by Ms. Rogers-Frere.
Oh, sorry. Right before we go into that activity, just want to state, Kyle made a really important point about providing access to our students. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, of course, is that in-person events stopped. And we really wanted to make sure that students who otherwise had no knowledge of where to transfer or limited knowledge of how to transfer still had the opportunity to engage in a transfer fair and still had the opportunity to meet with admission reps. We actually got to serve a dual purpose. We got to help our students, but we also helped admission reps with being able to meet our students where they were in creating this statewide virtual transfer fair. And it sounds just like it was, all 16 Maryland community colleges working together to put on one event. It allowed us to also maintain partnerships with our four-year colleagues. So we were able to maintain partnerships with our top 10 transfer destinations, with all of our in-state institutions, and those articulation and transfer agreements that we were working hard to maintain. We were able to make sure students were aware of those agreements and the benefits contained in them. And like Kyle said, Jacqui's going to take us now through a short 3-minute activity. I have my timer ready, Jacqui.
And can you move to the next slide? All right, so as we're thinking about this 3-minute activity, I really want to challenge you to think about your networks. So first, if you want to look at creating some kind of group similar to this in your state, there's a few pieces you need to think about in regards to your in-state network. One of the important pieces is if you wanted to create an affinity group, who would you include? So pull out a pen, pencil, paper, so you can write this down, so you can pull it out after this meeting to get started. But as you're writing, think about what professionals should be at the table. You know, like we talked about, we have a pretty broad group of both transfer advising, registrar's office, articulation officers, faculty. So think about in your roles, who would be the best at the table? Are you focusing specifically on transfer advising? Are you going to do more of a broad approach with transfer and articulation? And if so, start thinking about who should be at the table. So start putting down names, positions, things like that. And then the second question is, how do you work together? Are you working together to put together an event, to advocate at the state level, to work on creating best practices documents, things like that? What are your goals? Give you about 30 seconds to finish writing that piece up. All right. So keep writing if you want to on that piece, but the next part to consider is event planning. So like we talked about, part of why we created this virtual transfer fair was to recognize a need in our state. When COVID started, we saw a need of still providing our students transfer event opportunities. However, as we move towards going back into this hybrid environment, we've realized the need to continue to have virtual transfer fairs because of access and equity for students, especially thinking of students in rural communities, lack of public transportation, things like that. So if you want to think of it, thinking about an event planning standpoint, if you want to put together a virtual transfer fair, if you're a community college, you need to start, you will put, where do your students transfer to? If you're a four-year institution, think of this in context of where your students are coming from. So to start planning a virtual transfer fair, think about who should be invited to your fair. Is your list for a virtual fair different than your in-person list? Do you have more capabilities because it's virtual, or do you feel like you need to make it more targeted because it's virtual? So that's something you need to think about. Also think about, does it truly need to be different? Do you want to keep the same list for both? And then you want to click next, Kadijat. So one piece that's important to think about is if you're inviting schools, you need to think about, are they transfer friendly? A lesson we learned when we first started this was we were inviting institutions who then would tell us that they would make students start over on a bachelor's degree and take 120 credits. You know, when you're having these institutions come and participate in your events, in the students' eyes, you're kind of saying that this institution's okay and it's approved. So you want to make sure, are these institutions truly transfer friendly? You also want to think about the type of institutions you're inviting to these events, especially if you're coming from a two-year institution or community college. You want to consider if you're specifically, make sure you have HBCUs, which stand for Historically Black Colleges and Universities, HSI, which stand for Hispanic Serving Institutions, MSIs, which stand for Minority Serving Institutions, and also if you're going to invite private institutions. So think if you want to have an overarching type of transfer fair, or if you want to have a more targeted representation. Also consider, do you have special partnerships or articulation agreements with some institutions? You may have institutions where you don't send a lot of students to them, but the ones who do get to take part in a really special program or a really special benefit. So think about, are they included on this list to invite? And also think about what is your top 10. Here in Maryland, I don't know if it's different in different states, but in Maryland, when we say top 10 as a community college or two-year institution, that is the top 10 institutions our students transfer from. So if you make a list from the institution that most of your students go to the least, when we say top 10, it's that, you know, the ones that most of your students go to. If you're a receiving institution or a four-year institution, think about where are your biggest feeders? Where do the most students come from? So yeah, and then I'll pass it back to Kyle as you keep making notes.
Thank you. And hopefully I'm able to connect some of the dots as it relates to why you should have virtual transfer fairs or just virtual programming in general. So one of the things, especially during the heightened periods of COVID-19, we were able to see incremental changes in every virtual transfer fair. So that's increased participation. Although we weren't able to capture data the way we wanted to, funding still has been an issue as it relates to this particular area because we're using Zoom as a platform, meaning as it relates to capturing the data, this is something that we're still trying to figure out, but we're able to capture some data such as attendance and student satisfaction through data that we're collecting. Next, you have exposure is definitely a big component because anything online when it comes to marketing, promoting, appears to reach our demographic of students a lot better and easier, but also drilling down even more, students are not able to always attend in person. So this gives them the opportunity to review recorded sessions like we're doing here today, and just overall accessibility in reference to information. Next, you have another really big component is it definitely does reduce costs. Prior to COVID, transfer fares, I know at PGC specifically, we were spending about $4,000 just on the food budget. And that was the food budget just for our four-year institutions to come have breakfast and lunch. We also offered incentives for our students to participate. So we also covered their lunch. So that's adding another $1,000 because we would do pizza. Then you have those other costs, such as the promotional items that you develop and just resources in general. Currently, many of our resources we have been cut because of COVID, because we're operating differently. So facilitating smaller physical transfer events such as regular tabling, transfer student engagement against events specific to pathway have not only aided in reduced costs, but overall time needed to facilitate these transfer student engagement events. Next, you have eco-friendly portion, which eliminates the need to travel, which is a good for gas and eliminating mileage. And then the other part that I kind of mentioned before, our budget for printing materials for this event was $2,000. So we no longer had to worry about printing all those different flyers. Everything we do is electronic at this particular point. Next, you have higher engagement. Drilling down on this area, one thing I think we all need to improve on is student engagement, which in this case of transfer fairs means the opportunity to be more engaged in their transfer process, which also means we have to start meeting students where they are, which also means we have to be more creative and intentional with our programs and transfer fairs to assist in these efforts. So virtual transfer fairs allows them to be a lot more engaged no matter where they sit. I believe that greater flexibility, number 7, not only means the opportunity to tailor our virtual transfer fairs, but also means that it helps break inequities seen across the state as it relates to resources and students being able to participate in different things. One specific inequity is location specific. I think a lot of us recognize for schools more closer to the DMV, which is DC, Maryland, and Virginia, that's Prince George's Community College and Arundel Community College, Howard Community College, Montgomery Community College, and College of Selma, Maryland, we would get higher participation rates for those four-year colleges and universities based on our location. So what that meant for our other community colleges who were further out, many of the schools didn't show up to them, either because they were a smaller school, they had smaller numbers in participation. So hosting this virtual transfer fair, students had access to all of the same schools, if not more than what they had before. So again, this definitely provides an equity and inclusion and diversity perspective to these particular events. Now you have some of the planning considerations. Dr. Richmond can definitely jump in on this because she helped lead, actually she led all of the virtual transfer fairs with us assisting. However, one of the things when we first got started was developing an academic calendar and trying to figure out when was the best time to do this. So one of the things we would do is figure out everyone's spring break. We had to look at different calendars and different things in hopes of figuring out the best date because every school has different dates. Next, we developed work groups and planning to execute different areas. So, Dr. Richmond, what were some of those areas that we had for the planning work groups?
Sure, we had we had a work team that just did invitations and RSVPs. We had a work team that just did all the marketing for all the schools to be able to have. We had work teams doing all the logistics and planning for the website. So, and that was its own effort. And so you can kind of pick the work teams based on the plan that you have ahead of you and knowing what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. And it's such a great opportunity since we had 16 schools, you could really give team support and get to meet different people throughout the state and really get to capitalize on each person's strengths.
Next, you have the days and times, which was important. we have made adjustments every semester based on student turnout, feedback. So in the beginning, the fairs were about 4 days.
Mhm.
That took a lot of manpower, and we had good numbers, but it was just like, is this to the benefit of our students having them all of these days? So what we did was we started to cut them down. So we went from 4 days to now 2 days. In the prior semesters, even after going from the 4 days, they were usually in the beginning of the week. This particular semester, we did something different, which was we did a Thursday and Friday. We just received some wonderful feedback that we may go over today, but it appeared from the numbers that we had better turnouts. So one of the words that we try to make sure we use incremental change. Sometimes you won't see it overnight. In the beginning, it was just like, is this worth doing because we don't have significant numbers? But over time, those numbers will continue to increase. But one of the things I think many people have to understand or recognize is that many of us were not virtually friendly institutions, and that's something that we're going to touch on a little bit later as well. Next, we wanted to make sure we had an ADA compliance, so we had all the institutions send us their information on who should students contact if they need assistance with the virtual transfer fair. So that's such as meaning things such as an interpreter, reader, anything that they need in reference to ADA.
And
Next.
also with Kyle mentioned days and times, also consider that for our community college students, most of them are attending part-time. They may work during the day. So having evening sessions, which is something most of us did not do in our in-person transfer fairs, we were able to do having a virtual transfer fair. Consider that. And like Kyle said, we use survey feedback. So the first fair was on us. We were like, let's do Tuesday and Thursday and Monday and Wednesday. Yeah, let's do Monday through Thursday. That works for me. And the students are like, this was overwhelming. And I worked on that day. And so like Kyle said, we just took their feedback. The latest feedback said, I don't want to come to a fair early in the week. Can we do it on closer to the end of the week? So this was our first time having a Thursday and a Friday date, but we still have morning and evening sessions. So just trying to accommodate the students first, and then the reps, and then yourselves.
So in connection to that, as we mentioned, we were not virtually friendly or technology savvy institutions, even though we have someone wonderful like Jacqui to help us through that and lots of other representatives who are a part of the group. Training needs to be facilitated. We were all new to Zoom. Um, and just a little bit on Zoom for a second, because our institutions were paying for that platform, we had to navigate on how to use it and what works best. We actually researched prior. All of us said, well, what extra money, even though our budgets are cut, can we use to pay for a platform? And at the end of the day, we landed on Zoom because we were already paying for it. So we did additional trainings amongst the leadership group, and then we facilitated outside trainings for those who were going to help facilitate the event. Next, one of the other things we always want to do best practices. So we, again, research and assessment is definitely pivotal to us being successful, looking at the student assessments to figure out what days and times or what are best practices to doing anything virtual, because this was something new for many of us. So we did get additional trainings that we used throughout this process to make us be a lot more engaging to the students.
And we sent out a best practices PDF to all of the representatives who would participate, letting them know, like, maybe have a video running in your room, have representative contact information easily ready to copy and paste into the chat for students, letting them know that the chat, students can't see previous chats prior to them opening the room. So we just put best practices in there for the users so that they could have the best session possible.
And going along with the best practices, something we did a few times was we offered a live training with admissions representatives. So when we did our first virtual transfer fair, we were like, well, everyone's using different platforms. Just send us a link and use whatever platform you want. We realized that did not work. So then we were like, okay, everyone's going to use Zoom. But then we started to realize not every institution uses Zoom. So then we had reps coming who didn't know how to change their name or enter a breakout room, things like that. So then we started doing some live trainings to help them understand these are the expectations of the fair. And we also had them do some practice where they could practice assigning hosts, a practice moving to breakout rooms, things like that, to hopefully create a little bit less chaos during the lead up to the fair the day of.
Yeah, and a lot of these next 3 bullet points, getting students ready to participate, promoting the fair, and surveying participants. Kyle's going to show you some examples from our website of each of those. So we'll get right into that.
So going into the marketing promotions, again, when we first started this process, we were in the midst of the COVID-19. So the best thing we could do, because our campuses were shut down, were emails, putting the information on our institution websites, and partnering with some of our state institutions, such as MAC, which stands for Maryland
Association of Community Colleges.
Yes, so they actually help govern the community colleges for our state. And we also have the University of Maryland system, which oversees the state colleges and universities. So we fall under 2 umbrellas, but we work together to promote these particular events. In addition to that, as we mentioned, we try to do assessment and meet students where they are and preparing them for them. So during assessments, we were trying to figure out how can we make the transfer fairs as user-friendly as possible. So one of the things we did was we added a QR code or scan for these particular sessions. That way, when students would go online or the very few flyers that we may have had, they can just scan it and go directly there. But again, this is not all things we were doing in the beginning. This was incremental change that we learned to continuously do through assessment and through our prior thorns and roses and how we were operating before. Another thing that I want to add as it relates to, actually, we can go to virtual guides. That'll probably be even better to touch on. The virtual guides are important. And not only just virtual guides, this really goes into preparing our students for these transfer fairs. Again, as we were going through this process, we saw things that needed to change. Assessment is important. I don't say it enough, but we also gave students the information that they needed to be successful. We recognized that when students would go into the different rooms, they didn't know what questions to ask. They would go there. You might have one student asking all the questions, you write them down. So we provide additional guides. So Dr. Richmond, we love her to death. She helped structure that document, and every institution provided that to them, to their students. So the next go around, students came with something. They knew what questions to ask and how to ask them. Another thing that we've started to do a lot more are create events structured to helping them get ready for the transfer fair. So some of us will do a pre-transfer week or pre-transfer events so that way they can be even more informed of the questions that they need to ask and just be more engaged in the process. One of the videos that you see here for the transfer fair was one of our actual first videos, which helped people understand the technology. So there are 2 things we talk about: accessibility and meeting students where they are. We did provide paper documents where students can read word for word. However, depending on where you are, that's not how you learn, because we are in education. So one of the things is that we wanted to give people easier access to the documents by just one click. When you have to read too many things, they just log out and it just doesn't work. I know if you're like me, when I get instructions for a chair, I'm not reading all that. I'm going to figure out, take longer to put it together before I read all these instructions. So one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we had something that worked for anybody that wanted to participate.
Yeah, we also embedded resources on the website. We thought it was important that students know who on their campus they could ask questions if they couldn't find what they needed for the fair. So that's that box you see that says connect with community college transfer coordinators. And just like it sounds, it was literally just a list. It said, and Arundel Community College, contact Kadijat Richmond. Here's the email address, and so on and so forth. We had a list for accessing your disability services at your individual institutions, like Kyle mentioned, or Dr. Turman mentioned. Congratulations, Dr. Turman. Dr. Turman mentioned, we wanted to be ADA compliant. We wanted all of our students to have fair access to the fair. And so they had to make arrangements in advance, and this provided them the opportunity to know where to go. Dr. Turman, do you want to talk about the resources at the bottom?
Yes. So as we mentioned before, making sure that the resources were only one click away. Say, for example, many students did not have Zoom already on their phones. So, for example, you have the one click icon for Zoom. It allows them to easily download it through their phone. And then, okay, I know I won't remember the activity or the particular program. They were also able to just automatically add it to either their Google Calendar, Outlook calendar, and a really unique feature was the click notes icon. Students loved this because they didn't have to go look for paper. Usually they come not prepared outside exactly what we give them. So we understood that the more we gave them already within the settings, they were better prepared.
All right, some further considerations for hosting your virtual fairs. I know all of you are now like, I'm doing this. Think about really strongly who you want to invite. One of the hiccups we ran into was our first fair, we invited everyone. Come one, come all. I hope they come. Oh, they came. And not only did they come, but they brought everyone in the family. So really start to think about if you want your flagship institution. For us, that's University of Maryland, College Park. They came, but they also wanted every program at their school to have a breakout room so students could learn about those programs. Think about how much space you have, even virtual space, how many breakout rooms can you have, and how much information is enough or too much to be digested by a student. So think very strongly about who to invite. Also thinking about a hosting platform that allows for more engagement. As we move forward, with the success of the virtual transfer fairs, we really want to look into a platform that will allow us to have like a scavenger hunt or be able to talk to students in real time. Like we envision this place where they would go to breakout rooms, but then they could have like an information desk. And at that information desk, they can talk to a representative from their school about some of the things they were learning and clarify some things versus the main room that has 30 some odd people or hundreds of people in it and not wanting to raise your hand and ask a question there. Think about how to best advertise. For many of us, we are back in person, but you want to make sure that you're creating marketing materials that reach students no matter where they are and that can break through the short attention spans that we have. So many of us want to send the flyer out 2 months in advance, and the student read the flyer today and they remembered it today, and that happened to your event. So think about how to best reach them without inundating your students about this really critical event that they need to attend. Also want to consider scholarship deadlines, making sure your event comes prior to major deadlines that will affect the student in successful transfer. And also think about international students. One of the things that we are moving towards now, but we did not have the opportunity to do in our first iterations of the fair, was target international students and get information for them on how to transfer successfully. What about our dreamers? What about our students who are DACA? How do we best facilitate transfer for all of our students? Because it doesn't look the same for everyone. Some of the barriers that we encounter, we want to make you aware of so that as you're planning, maybe you can kind of get ahead of these. And as we go into our future planning sessions, we'll be looking at, we talked really early about legislation and policy, but think about the political entities that are involved in planning a fair or in putting on an event and the competing priorities. It's best to know the priorities before you start planning, so that you can make sure your event will be successful, it will be attended, it will be advertised. Think about the virtual platforms. We've talked a lot about then and now, so take that into account. What are you going to do about your no-shows? When a student shows up to the room to see XYZ University, and that's the only one they wanted to see, how would you best assist this student? Think about attendance in each of the school's breakout rooms. One of the recurring feedback that we get from our very small private institutions is, I only got 1 or 2 students. How can you ensure students will come and see me? So start thinking about that. Also, definitely think about priority deadlines versus the date of the fair, which we mentioned, and think about planning. Planning needs to start well in advance, and don't feel like you need to do it by yourself. There's a tragic story that happens when you work alone. So work smart and work together. Some recognition. We are proud to announce that we have recognition throughout the state of Maryland and beyond on putting on this virtual transfer fair. We received the Innovative Program Award from the Maryland College Personnel Association. That was unexpected and exciting and just really great because innovative was in the title. So we knew that we were doing something new, something that was necessary, but something new and something to be proud of. And I think that was encouragement to continue doing the hard work. We also received calls, all of us received calls from other departments, other areas at the institution asking, oh, how did you put on this fair? I'm thinking of doing something similar for XYZ, my health students or our education students. What platform did you use? How did you collect surveys? And when other departments were inquiring, we're realizing, oh, they see that we've done something successful and they want to try to emulate that for their area. And they want to be able to reach students in that way. So we hope that sitting through today's presentation and participating in a 3-minute activity will also allow you to see how you can be more influential and be a driving force behind your transfer students and ensuring their success. What's next for us, you may be wondering? Well, we've begun to discuss how we can have like a hybrid transfer fair, being able to reach students both in person and virtual, because many of our campuses are not 100% back to in person. So how do we reach all students now as we're in this ever-changing landscape? This November, we'll be doing a virtual HBCU transfer fair. We're looking at coming up with some type of repository for all of our events. One of the cool things that happened is we planned this virtual transfer event, but we also got to discuss with one another, like, what else are you doing for Transfer Student Week? Oh my God, that's amazing. It's too late for me to plan the same thing, but can my students come to your event? And so we have a lot of events that, let's say Kyle planned it, but Anne Arundel students, College Southern Maryland students also can attend it. And so that's been really great. So now our students have even more to look forward to. We're also going to be doing some articulation, writing, training, and guidance. We have one of the things that many of us wish we had was some training from, I don't know, the old heads, the people who were already here and who knew how to do it. How did they do it so well? And so that's one of the things that we want to give back in our state. We're doing new hire training manuals and considerations for creating those manuals. Many of you may be hiring managers and you're thinking like, how do I train individuals who are not in advising, but to understand transfer? And so that's one of the things we're working on. And then as always, professional development opportunities. That is what we have for you today. And we are happy to take questions and comments.
Well, I certainly have a couple of questions for you. So if the attendees don't have anything right away, I would love to pose them to you. One is a little bit more operational in terms of as a interinstitutional group, who takes ownership of the website and the registration? You said that you parsed them out to different affinity groups, but I know that there's like a charge for hosting a website. So like, how do you kind of delegate that?
That's a great question. I am a master delegator and I work with, I think it's best to be straightforward and tell people to sign up for work groups that they can commit to. So Jacqui knows that she's really good at communication. She knows that she can manage an inbox. She knows that she can respond very quickly and accurately. Okay, so Jacqui signed up for the communications work group. She now owns the mailbox. If a representative contacts us and says, I haven't heard from anyone in 3 days, I know I'm contacting Jacqui. Jacqui, what's going on? What's going on in the mailbox? And I think that all of us being professionals and being in the transfer light felt responsible that the event was successful because it was our event and it was the first of its kind. And there's something about accountability that makes people work a little differently. So when Jacqui's name is on there for communication, she knows that there are 15 other community colleges who know Jacqui's supposed to be doing this. So Jacqui's not going to drop the ball. So that's how we did that. With the website, we partnered with MAC, Maryland Association of Community Colleges. And in partnering with anyone, make sure that you have a point person, a first and last name that you can reach out to directly, get on good terms with that person. So we worked with a magnificent woman by the name of Brooke Henderson, and she even gave us her cell phone number, and she would work with me on Sunday mornings to make sure our website was together. And there were a lot of last minute changes, like a lot of last minute changes. So just make sure you're finding people who are invested in transfer students like you're invested in transfer students. We like to call them transfer champions. Make sure you find your transfer champion.
And what we also did as well, just to add to that, every institution did make sure that they post the information on their website to aid in that additional marketing and promotions as well.
And then for an email account, we just actually opened a free Gmail account. So that way we all can have access to it. And it's not just from one institution's, like at this institution.edu. It's a generic email account. And that way we also have the historical knowledge we can pass down. And we also store all our information about how we planned the fairs in that Gmail as well.
And the reason that is important, just in case people don't understand, we've been in situations where people leave the institution and no one has access to it anymore. And please understand the work that we have done has taken years to get to. So starting from scratch is terrible. So now we have something that will always be active. That's also something new, is active and it's live that everyone can access.
It sounds like you've got a great system of organization, and it makes a documenter happy that you're interested in having that historical repository. Okay, I have one more question for you about your attendees, and you said that you have incremental successes in your attendance numbers. How do you follow up with them? There's a survey, I'm assuming, about the event, but how do you know if they have in fact transferred, and if there's any relationship to that experience based on their attendance at your fair?
Well, Dr. Richmond can definitely follow up on what I say, and Jacqui as well. That's actually one of the things that we're working on statewide, receiving actual data from our four-year partners in reference to the list of names. One of the things we try to incorporate that in is either in MOUs and articulation agreements. The reason that's important is because sometimes we can assist them or assist the students with information that would have been more impactful to their transfer success and while they're at their four-year colleges and universities. But for now, what we usually do is when they sign up for the transfer fair or any of the events, we do receive their email, ask for specific information, and we do reach out to the students to figure out if they graduated or not. We also do have access for most of us. What is the tool?
National Student Clearinghouse.
Yes, that is what we use. And I know one of the things that we've done specifically in our registrar's office, and actually we all might be starting to do this at some point, we ask for them to run data as relates to where the transcripts are going out to. And that allowed us to see, okay, there are different types of feeder schools as well, and things that we need to change in reference to how we're processing as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I would say that we don't have a way to say A caused B. So we can't say a student came to the fair, therefore they successfully transferred. But what we can say, and what the literature says, is a student was exposed to and now knows about the college options that they have before them. They now know that they need to plan. They now understand that certain credits may transfer or may not transfer, and they have a point person. And we know that when that bridge is built between the 4-year and the community college, the sending and the receiving institution, a student is going to be a lot more successful and stand a better chance at earning that bachelor's degree. And that's what we're pushing for.
Awesome. Well, we have not had any other questions come in from the audience. So I do have one last thing. I know that we're closing in on the end of this hour. Just very briefly, as a 4-year institution, what can we do to be a better partner in terms of collaborating on an initiative like this?
I can kind of get it started. One of the things we actually started amidst COVID, sadly, that had to happen for us to really start operating differently, is starting a group where we all come together, the 4 years and the community college, because as of right now, it's us and them, and that's not how we need to be operating, especially where student success and transfer success should be our main focus. So I definitely think, hopefully next time you talk to us, that will be something else that we've started as well. But I definitely think that is the first thing that you can do, is working directly with your community colleges. And sometimes if everyone isn't on the same plate, we can start in small groups. Honestly, with the 3 of us, sometimes we do things small and people say, hey, I want to join that. So even if it's just you and one other community college partnering together to do everything, you'll definitely get buy-in.
Yeah, so identify your transfer champions at the 4-year and let your community college partners know who those persons are. Pre-transfer advising is working really well in the state. So a number of our 4-year partners have hired someone who then works at the community college, just helping students transfer to their 4-year institution, not stealing the students, but helping ease the transition. So pre-transfer advising, I think, is a great opportunity as well. And then finally, and this is a personal platform, but being open to evaluating transfer credits without a student applying to your institution. Our students need to know before they make the decision on how to spend that last $65 that they have, that this school is going to accept at least 70% of the credits that I've taken. And it's really hard to help a student transfer and believe in their own success when they can't apply to your school just to find out that you want them to start over, or you're only taking English and math. So I think being open to evaluating, doing tentative evaluation of student transcripts helps them to see the value in the work that they're completing and to know that they belong amongst your student body.
And going off of what Dr. Richmond was saying also, and back to the idea of pre-transfer advising, don't tell a student they need to apply in order to get advising. I have some students or institutions that say, they set a transfer deadline a year in advance, so that way they can get a hold of their transcripts to evaluate them. You're charging the student for advising.
And the other thing I would also, that is definitely pivotal, being transparent with communication. Sometimes our students will hear all my credits transferred. They don't know to ask as what. So they will get to a school, sadly, because that does happen, not as much, but they will get to a school and they will find out, well, they transferred only as electives. I don't need 100 and something credits as electives. I need credits that can't count towards graduation and my major. So definitely working to be more transparent as to how those courses transfer into the schools as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of your time and advice today on the virtual transfer fair and creating those good relationships. It was a pleasure hosting all of you. If there's not going to be anything else or any final words, I will bid you all to have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you
Thanks,
for having
everyone.
us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.